I came to the island to take up a teaching post in 1986, and I lived in at school for 7 years, and then I moved to Macclesfield, and I have had 4 children, and I've lived in Macclesfield and recently in Ayre for the last 30 years, and I'm still teaching full-time at secondary school.
And do you have a political background at all?
I've been a commissioner for Macclesfield from 2004 to 2008, and I've recently taken up a post as a commissioner with Ayre.
So this is the first time you've stood?
It is indeed.
So what prompted it?
I think there are a number of really important issues, from climate change, planning, housing, provision, connectivity in the parishes, and I just want to be a strong voice for the people of Ayre and Michael in raising those issues and getting our voices heard.
What was the moment that made you decide? What was the moment? I mean, obviously this is something that's been with you for a while. What was the moment you thought, right, that's it, I'm putting my name in?
The declarations had to be made yesterday, and so I decided that if nobody else was standing who I thought I could support, I would declare, and I did a week ago.
Where do you see Ayre and Michael? What are the big issues, the big topics for?
Ayre and Michael is the most beautiful area of the island, together with Macclesfield. It's incredibly pretty. It's got the wonderful coastline. We are a biodiversity island, and I am passionate about representing not just the needs, but what the people who live in the parishes, what's important to them. And what I see is important to them at the moment is the housing issue, the planning issue, connectivity as in broadband and local transport, the roads, and then the other issues which are more general, which are more island-wide, such as access to healthcare, access to good quality education, and so on.
Do you think that maybe because it's Ayre and Michael and it's a little bit out of the way that it's ignored?
I think it needs a stronger voice, and I think in Tynwald I could give it that stronger voice. I think there are big issues coming up for Ayre and Michael, as I say, planning, the need to refurbish and to have a capital programme of government housing. Derby is the obvious example. And also with the potential of an island rate coming in, I will oppose that because those of us who live out in the parishes we pay for the services at the moment that we have, and we shouldn't be asked to pay for services in towns that we don't have access to. So at the moment, I'm in Ayre, and we don't even have a bus service. So even getting to school, getting to a hospital appointment can be a major undertaking.
In terms of, you were saying about it with investment and the housing, etc., and yet it's a beautiful place. How do you strike that balance?
I think we have to stop building for investors. I think we have to build according to the needs of the local community. And that doesn't mean big estates. It means small local developments and according to the needs of the local people. So if elderly retired people wish to downsize, they should be able to downsize and move to somewhere in their parish or in their locality. They shouldn't always have to move into a town. And for young people who come from the parishes, who want to have a home in the parishes, they should get good quality housing. And today that means being energy efficient and having double glazing and those sorts of things. They shouldn't have second standard housing.
There will be those in that area that you wish to represent that like things the way they are and don't want to see anything new or improved in terms of not maybe improved, but don't want to see new builds.
I think that's true. I don't know of anybody who wants to see large housing estates
Or any
built.
housing though at all. They like things the way they are, and that's
I don't think that's true. I think if you go through, there are small areas, plots of land, which are quite suitable for housing, but to meet the needs of the people, not to meet the needs of investors. And that's a really big point, because our young people are not coming back to the island for a whole multitude of reasons. But one of those is tied in with housing, because young people today have to rent to get their first home, and they can be paying £1,000 a month to rent a home, and that can mean that they haven't got that money to save up for a deposit. And if you take the under 25s and what they earn, then you look at the person in the middle. They would need to borrow 10 times their salary in order to get their first home. And that's why housing has become recently completely out of their grasp.
It's not exclusive to the Isle of Man, though. Many of them going to England will face exactly the same problems, and if even worse situation in the UK.
I completely agree that there are some areas of the UK, the ones that spring to mind are London, Edinburgh, Bristol, places like that, which are expensive. And for young people, they may go there for a job or such like. But other places are much, much cheaper if they wanted to settle down and buy a house.
But trying to get a mortgage in the UK is becoming increasingly more difficult, as it is supposedly here in the Isle of Man.
Yeah, but they possibly have, if they're graduates, our graduates, they possibly have a partner, and they possibly have access to better paid jobs. I would say wage stagnation for many of our essential workers over the last decade has been a big, has made matters so much worse, because prices of properties have, as we know, gone up 40%, and your wages, if you're a care worker, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, have not gone up.
But then again, we can say the last 2 years effectively have been 2 years that none of us have ever experienced before.
That's true, and that's another pointer, that with our declining birth rate, and our birth rate on the island is the marker that we can use to measure just how difficult it is for young people to come back and settle on the island, because our birth rate's gone down from 1,000 babies each year to just 660 last year.
But the birth rate's on the decline, but as we've seen, I don't think there's ever been so many people have moved to the Isle of Man in one go as they have done since the beginning of the pandemic, really. The number of people coming up and speaking to hauliers, etc., they've never been so busy because of people moving from elsewhere to the Isle of Man.
And that's good. And quite genuinely, if people...
But that's pushing the house prices up.
There's
a demand. Well, if people want to buy houses in the Isle of Man, the prices then can go up. If people aren't moving to the Isle of Man, then the house prices will drop.
And if people are buying, investors are just buying houses. So if you can build 200 houses and investors will come along and buy all 200, you create the need to buy more. I think what will be really interesting is to see when the results of the latest census come out. Let's look at the demographics of the population of the Isle of Man and plan accordingly. I am absolutely pro building to meet need, but not building just for investors to get a return on their money.
Okay, financially, how do we address that?
I think there's the amount of government spending on housing, in other words, government capital expenditure on local housing for low to middle income families has dropped enormously, and that needs to come back. Because, as I said before, there are many young people who haven't got a big deposit to put down for a mortgage, and a rent to buy scheme would be a real benefit to the island. and that would encourage families. There are lots of factors that enable young people to have more than one child or any children at all. One of them is having a decent house, and that means if you build decent 3-bed houses with gardens and community support on a rent-to-buy basis, where people aren't constantly worried about, if I can't pay my mortgage, we'll lose the house. If they can find affordable childcare, and I would say that all 3 and 4-year-olds should have free childcare, that is how you would begin to address our very low number of students, not our students returning, but young people coming to settle here on the Isle of Man. We are a remote island, and it's testament to the wonderful teaching that we've had at our schools that 60% of our A-level students have got university places. Going into their 20s, it's their right to go out and explore the world and get a broad education. And not all of those will come back to the island, and neither should we expect it. For many, their particular speciality, they can't get a job here even if they wanted to. However, we can attract people back to fill the skills and the posts that we have to offer. But if you tie that in with very high house prices and just lack of opportunity, they won't come back. So if you can offer somebody, come to the Isle of Man, take up this post, you're 25, there's a rental house that if you like it, you can buy it 5 years later or return it to the government. And in that time, if you can make friends in the community, you can have a child. The other thing you have to do is to maintain that family standard of living, that family income, while the children are young. So under the age of 3, you really have to try and maintain their income. If you do that, and they have done this in Scandinavia, then the birth rate rises, because having one child is one thing. Having 2 children, maybe a baby and a toddler, or a baby and a 3-year-old, and trying to find affordable childcare for 2 children effectively blocks one of the parents from carrying on working because it's so expensive. And the government need to step in and maintain the level of income for those families, give them decent housing of a suitable size, and then we would see gradually our birth rate would rise again. So that birth rate falling so low is the guideline, if you like, to what's happening in society on the Isle of Man, that young people are just finding it so difficult to get on the housing ladder.
Once they're on, how do you stop eventually those houses ending up in the hands of the landlords? Because we look at the first-time buyers' houses from 30-odd years ago, I guesstimate around 90% of those properties now are now rented out through landlords who own all the majority of the properties. How do you stop that?
Well, that's a legislative decision. You can make. You can legislate, for instance, for local government houses.
And the reason I say that is because you mentioned that, like the 25-year-old coming over. What's to stop them buying a house and then deciding to move on and selling it to a landlord who then
you can put in a clause which requires them to offer it back to the government. You can put in a clause that requires them to only be able to sell it to an Isle of Man.
Certainly, with lots of first-time buyer schemes in the past, they couldn't sell for 10 years. If they were going to sell for the first 10 years, then they had to sell it back to the government, etc. Even after that, as I say now, we look back at those first-time properties and see that it's not, the circle's not moved on. It's just ended up back in the hands of the landlords.
Ended up at the landlords because that's where the most profit is to be made. But you can legislate to ensure that certain houses, and particularly ones built by the government, actually stay within the Isle of Man's local population. You can legislate for that and prevent that house except by default, being sold to an investor.
Okay. We've talked enough about housing,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
What other issues are really making you, wanting to do, what are the issues do you think Ayre and Michael will be won and lost?
Won and lost. Well, one that I haven't heard raised, but I am really concerned about, is the rate, which is being the rating system, new rating system, because once all the houses have been newly rated, there may be a push to come up with an all-island rate. And right now, I don't think that is fair at all for anybody who lives in a parish.
Because
The rates in the towns are so much higher, and that's because they provide a whole range of different facilities for the people who live in the towns, and the people in the towns pay for those facilities through their rates. Those who live in the parishes have lower rates because we provide a very different set of facilities which people in the parishes want, from hedge cutting and things like that. But we don't provide facilities that the towns do, and neither do we use them. So my take is that the parishes and the commissioners should continue to control the rate and levy the rate on their electors and their householders. So if you pay to have your bins collected, you pay for that. You pay for the services that you use and you have provided.
we're going down a council tax type road there, or even a poll tax type road, which we know from the UK, kind of the history side of things, that was not very popular, and we know what happened to the Prime Minister through that. But but certainly that's what you would like to see introduced.
Not introduced. I would like it to. Would like the present system to continue, whereby the local tax that you paid is based on the local services that you have provided for you. And at the moment, that's done by each of the separate parishes in Ayre and Michael. And that we don't have an all-island rate, which is basically will mean that the rates for those in the parishes will go up significantly to pay for...
you pay for what you use. That's exactly what you're saying. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so that's the housing and the rates.
Connectivity. So whether it's broadband, local transport, state of the roads. If you live in the parish, you are going to have to spend a lot of time getting even to access any of the normal facilities, such as a hospital appointment, a school, or even just to do your shopping. So at the moment, from Derby, we don't even have a bus during the day.
This has been mooted in the past, though, hasn't it? So
it's not, but that's just terrible. It's like food banks. How do we become the 5th or 6th richest nation on earth and have a need for food banks? Why are we not holding our heads in shame?
Yeah, people will say that if you look around the island, apart from maybe coming in and out of Douglas, but there's just empty buses going around the island.
Well, if you don't even have the choice of a bus, if on a non-school day you can literally be taking your bus to go to work and be told this isn't a bus, and you're thinking, but it's a bus every other day, I want to take it.
So what would you like to see happen?
It's far more essential that people are connected who live out in the rural areas by public transport, because we assume everybody has access to a car in the countryside, but everybody under the age of 16 doesn't have a car, and many others also don't have access to a car or don't drive, and it's absolutely essential that they have access to a reliable public transport service. Ideally, that's an electric bus. And the other thing I would say is a big one is jobs and job security, because we know with the gig economy at the moment that many, especially again young people, have irregular incomes. That makes budgeting for them incredibly difficult. You go to work one day and told, we don't need you, you have no income, but you still have all your outlays. And it means, I feel that Derby, especially the industrial estate there, is a prime site to start the green revolution on the island and get in jobs for putting solar panels, getting the climate change moving, because I feel that the island has stagnated. 2050 doesn't exist anymore. It's 2030. So we need to be setting deadlines. We need to be... I noted that the government has just introduced from next autumn a scheme whereby they will pay 50%, up to 50% of the cost of putting solar panels on homes. But you've got to have the money to pay for it in the first place. So this is completely excluding the people who probably really need it most. So people who don't have savings to spend on solar panels of up to £6,000 are not even going to be eligible for that scheme. But as long as you're earning up to £112,000, you are eligible. So to actually make it equitable, those on low to middle incomes who won't have up to £6,000 in spare savings should be given grants to do exactly that, because it's the right thing for us to do. A mixture of solar and wind and a connector to the UK, so that we can access the UK's wind and renewable energy source, is something we need to push forward here.
We're running out of time. Anything else you'd like to add that we've not touched upon?
I will say that the cost of living on the island is exceedingly high, and it especially affects those on fixed incomes. And our retired population, who rely solely on the Manx state pension, must have that increase, annual increase guaranteed, because otherwise their standard of living will fall below what would be called an acceptable. Nobody on this island, this rich, beautiful island, should have to choose between heating and eating.
In terms of you going out, are you knocking on doors, canvassing? How is your...
Okay, so I'm a teacher still, and I am back to work full-time on the 6th of September. So I will get round to, on my little red bike, and I will get round to speak to people as much as I can. And I have a Facebook page which will be going out daily with updates for people to look at. It's just Madeleine for Ayre and Michael. And I will put updates on that. And people are welcome to phone me at home in the evening and have a chat. I'm not going to get to everybody. I'm not even going to attempt to get to everybody. It's a huge rural area. But I just want everybody to know that I will first and foremost be an MHK for the constituents of Ayre and Michael, and shout as loud as I can in Tynwald for what they need and what we need to make Ayre and Michael a prosperous place where everybody enjoys the country life.
And the number to ring?
817 001 in the evenings, because from the 6th I will be back at school.
There we go. Okay, happy with
Are
that?
you happy with that?
Yeah, perfect.
Good.
Thank you very much.